Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Just another woman I can't get a date with.
Let's talk radio.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect of a new world order.
The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
How can I convince you when your ears refuse to hear? You turn your heart away from me each time that I've gone near. Your eyes refuse to meet with mine, they glance away in fear.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Kling Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
Well, it's just a show. How can I contain the thing we have to say? Knowing that your eyes are blinded by the light.
He is the free American, Kling Douglas. Catch the Free American weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Every time I think about the damage that's been done, the anger wells inside me till I'm almost overcome. I want to tear the moon out of the sky and rock the sun.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American. I'm your host, I'm Clay Douglas, and my guest today is Peter Kling. We will be, Letters to Earth is the name of his book. I just kind of felt like a little musical interlude first.
Communism is dead, they said. I think they lied, it's true. They existed, so USA. Hey, right here it lives and here it breathes and feeds upon our liberties, and you have the nerve to say it's not that way? Well, they're taking the patriots away, ha-ha. They're taking the patriots away, ho-ho, hee-hee, ha-ha. To the prison camp, where life's unbearable all the time, and I'll be happy to see my patriot friends again as they shackle me in, and they're taking the patriots away, ha-ha.
Just a little flashback to Carl Kling about 15 years ago, before he went insane. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Doing well, Clayton. I remember that song.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that brings back some interesting memories of my childhood. When that song came out, they actually had to pull that because of the content.
Well, that was pretty true of almost every song Carl Kling wrote, and I found somebody that I tried to get in touch with Carl. I got permission to use his music on my show, but I tried to get in touch with him. I wanted to have him on, and somebody called me and said, well, Carl stayed with us for a while, but he did this, and he did this, and he did that, and we had to cut him loose. We had to send him away. So I don't know what happens, and I was just talking to you off the air about this. You know, I sometimes, I mean, my whole philosophy is I want to know the truth, so I question everything. I question the Bible. I say, you know, I got kicked out of Sunday school when I was about 8 years old or 6 years old for asking the Sunday school teacher, well, if God created Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve had two sons, who did their sons marry? Where did we come from? I got kicked out of Sunday school for that, so.
All you got to do is turn a few more verses there, and it tells you that when it gets to the story of Adam, or the conclusion of Adam's life, it tells you that he had sons and daughters, and he lives to be, was it 936 years or something like that. And now people might say 900. Well, wait a minute. You know, let's just take it for face value that this system tells us lies at every chance and every turn it gets. And if you don't believe me, go spend 5 minutes on the internet looking at all the latest news. So let's just take it for granted that everything that we learned in school is pretty much fake, pretty much a lie. There's very little substance in it. And as of now, we're pretty much all dog-tagged by the Queen of England and servants of her. Nothing. We think that we escaped the revolution, or that we won the revolution. No, we didn't win the revolution. We are an enslaved people, as is the rest of the world. So actually, who are we enslaved by? And you see, now you have to ask better questions to find out the answer to that. And when you look, the answers are all right before us. But wouldn't you agree, Clayton, that we are an enslaved people?
Absolutely, and I think this goes way beyond Christianity. I think this goes back several 100,000 years when we were really created to mine the gold in South Africa. I mean, we got...
Well, that's what they would like us to believe. You know, here's an interesting thing, Clayton. I never learned religion. As a matter of fact, as a young child, I was instructed never to get involved in two things: politics or religion.
Yeah, that was a communist that told you that. I asked a barber that during the presidential campaigns. He said, I never heard anybody talk like you talk. I said, oh, you must be from that era when they told you you couldn't discuss politics or religion in public. He said, well, yeah. I said, well, that was a communist that told you that.
No, you see, it wasn't that I couldn't discuss them. It was that I was not to get involved in them. There's a difference.
Okay.
Okay? And you see, I was told not to get involved in them by the same people who are teaching me the scriptures. The same people who are teaching me the Bible were telling me not to get involved in religion. Wait a minute. Isn't that kind of like an oxymoron? No, because I didn't learn religion, I learned exopolitics. What's exopolitics? The political interaction between us here on Earth and interdimensional or interstellar or intergalactic beings who we commonly call aliens. And if you don't think we're invaded, go do a little research.
Well, I almost, I have a little disagreement with that. I don't know if it's aliens or if it's just the older inhabitants of this planet. I think that maybe all the aliens, the ancient aliens, came from here and went out into space and explored other planets.
Well, you know, Clayton, that is one theory. And there are, you know, it's hard to say, well, no, it's not hard. It's impossible. It's impossible to say, I've got absolute proof. I want somebody, and who's ever listening, to show me or give me absolute proof that any alien life form exists.
Well, I do have an ex-father-in-law who escorted the surviving Gray from Roswell to Truman's office. I invited him to be on my show. He said, no, I want to live. And, but
yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And Clayton, I had alien contact at my 18th birthday, or just shortly after, about a month after my 18th birthday. I can't prove a single thing that happened. However, they left with this final message. We're going to kill you. I've escaped death 15 times, was dead once, and got sent back. I've got a very different perspective of the world in which we live.
It's happened to me a bit. Are you talking about me?
Yeah, here we go with these conversations again.
I swear to God, I just have, there's some questions I have. I don't know whether I was kicked out of heaven or barred from hell. I don't really know, but they told me my work wasn't done, and they sent me back, get back into that body.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's hard to keep you afraid of death when you've already died a couple of times, and it ain't no big deal.
He's been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Yeah, you know, I think it's great. I think everybody should have a near-death experience. It would change your perspective on life.
Yeah, people ask after my so-called accident, which of course wasn't an accident at all. People said, "Aren't you afraid to ride now, Clay? Aren't you afraid to get back on that Harley?" I said, "No, I'm not afraid to ride now. You ever trip? Are you afraid to walk?"
Right. After I was told that they were going to kill me, my first accident was on a motorcycle. I dropped the damn thing doing over 60 miles an hour, and what was scary about it, I was a kid, I couldn't afford leathers at the time, and I was taking a bug that a friend of mine had just the week before told me. He was a bug collector. He said, "If you ever see this bug, get it for me." I found the bug, and I was taking it over to his house. It was in a glass jar in my pocket. When I impacted the ground, I impacted with enough force to unscrew the glass jar. The glass jar never broke. It was actually in my windbreaker right at my gut level. The interesting thing is, just before I got on the highway to head over to my friend's house, I thought, that would suck if I got wiped out on this bike and that glass jar broke. They'd be picking glass out of my guts for a month. Not 5 minutes later, I got wiped out, and the jar never broke. The bug was still in it, too, by the way. I got one hell of a case of road rash, and outside of a dislocated thumb, that was it. Got up and ran back to my bike, picked it up, and was like, what did I do to my bike? So, you know, it was like, all in an instant. The only scratch I put in my helmet was when I finally stopped rolling down the road, and my helmet hit the ground. Other than that, I had a bad case of road rash, and that was it. But it was like, wow. A couple of months later, I bought a new car. The left front tire came off it as I was going over the mountain. See, a friend of mine rolled it down a riverbank. Came away from that with some back problems, but pretty much unscathed. I remember looking at the car saying, well, blow up or do something. Don't just lay there. They found the tire on the other side of the river, I was told. But whatever. You know, just crazy things like that have happened. In my death experience, I was actually killed by a doctor, and I can't prove it because the doctor left the country and he took the records with him. So his associates told me.
Well, that's interesting too, because after my motorcycle accident, they said, the emergency people said, "Man, this guy fought us all the way. Didn't want to get on the stretcher, didn't want to get in the ambulance." And once I got on the stretcher and got me to the hospital, they kept me drugged for 3 months. I got no memory of 3 months of my life in 3 hospitals. And
wow.
my wife said, "Well, Clay, those doctors saved your life." I said, "No, they didn't. They tried to kill me."
Yep. You know, it's like, well, and people might hear us talk about these experiences and say, "Oh, wait, these guys are nuts." No, wait a minute. You know, I just got done listening, before we talked, I got listening to a link to a show that they listen to. This is interesting. A person with royal connections. I'll let it go with that. And they asked me what I thought about this, and this was a link about this guy, Sam Jenkins, and he wrote this book, How Black Ops Stopped Ascension. And I listened to part 1, and he claims to be a super soldier. He claims to be somewhat biometric. You know, he's got implants. They listen to him. And I'm listening to all the different things that he's saying, and I'm like, okay, maybe when I first started listening, I thought, yeah, this guy's cheese may have slid off his cracker, but then he started talking about interdimensionals and how they're working with the military, and I'm like, okay, now you got my attention. And how they're actually, basically they've turned this planet into a prison planet using high technology, and they are actually controlling our thoughts. Gee, how about that? How can do that?
I refer to television or Talmud vision as, you know, they don't call it programming for nothing, folks. I mean, here's what it's doing to you. It's teaching you how to think, what to think.
Yeah, now, you know, here's the thing. Most people, and they work hard all day. They fight the traffic back and forth, you know. Their boss has ridden them half the day. They're late on the report. They finally get everything finished. They rush home. If they rush home into a family, they sit down, they eat a meal, and then they turn on the idiot box. And what happens now? This is actually what physically happens. You've eaten a meal. You relax. You sit back on the couch, and you get out of that beta fight and flight mode that you've been in all day. Your mind starts to relax, and it brings you closer into the alpha mode, which is the first step of our, quote, subconscious level, but really it's the first part of our spiritually conscious level. And now you're sitting in front of the TV. The TV is playing at a specific frequency, which is not normal to begin with. And they're programming all of these things into your brain while you are in the alpha state. And a lot of people even fall asleep to the TV.
Yes.
So you get this alpha state programming. Now, there's no telling what signals are being overridden or overlaid within the programming that you're watching, let alone the programming itself. Now, I'm going to be honest. I spend a lot of money in communication every month, and a part of that communication bill is the internet and TV. And I do have the TV on a lot. However, I choose my programming very carefully. I love watching documentaries. It comes from the final part of Soylent Green, where Edward G. Robinson is looking at the beautiful nature pictures as he's already taken the injection to become part of the food chain. But anyway, it's like, my God, when I first saw Soylent Green back in the 70s, I quickly identified with that character and thought, I'm going to be the same age come 2022 when this all takes place, and could this possibly be the future of what we are facing? And going back to this super soldier whose interview I was listening to, he's talking about the transhuman agenda to essentially spiritually kill off humans, and that's going on with the Fukushima situation where we're all being radiated. And if you look at the 2045 initiative, they want to take us to a body which is made of nanobots. So essentially, you will have a spiritually connected robot body. Interesting, this type of nanobot physical body could also be inhabited by interdimensionals. So could the interdimensionals be having the human race, which is now committing Fukushima suicide, among many other types of suicide, watch Ebola, could they be using us to build the technology that they need to get into the physical world? Oh, yes, indeed.
Quite possibly, quite possibly. And
we are slated for extinction as a race. The biological human race is slated for extinction.
Well, they put it in stone. They put it in stone. They want to eliminate, 90%, 2/3 of the population of the world, and
No, Clayton, they want to reduce the world's population by 95%.
Right, and what'll be left will be probably 49 million slaves and 1 million elite.
Or maybe just the elite. You see, here's an interesting thing. You notice how Congress, or the government in general, has become so ineffective? They can't do anything. They can't even agree about impeaching a president that seems to have violated the very Constitution of the United States. Now, my question is, two, number one, who's controlling Congress? And the second question is, are they too busy trying to save their own skins, politicking for a better seat in their underground cities?
Well, they have the underground cities, and they've had the underground cities, according to archaeologists that I've had on my show before. Jonathan Gray, who does, I think, an excellent job. He said they've got these underground tunnels and cities that go under the oceans that have been there for thousands of years.
They very well may be. You know, you go back and look at the scriptures, and here's the thing. Clayton, number one, I've got no use for religion, nor do I have much use for government. When you track religion back historically, it takes us back to the Fertile Crescent, the start of civilization, where we are told historically that civilization started right here in the Fertile Crescent. Now, we go and examine this, and you don't get much information from the scriptures. The only thing that you get from the scriptures is that the story about Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter in opposition to Yahweh, and then you get the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, but historically, when you go and you look at what has been translated from the cuneiform text, which has been recovered, you get a story of a alien race, or a race not terrestrial, not part of the human race, comes to visit the Sumerians, and they give them religion and government, along with a lot of technology, but primarily religion and government are the keys to controlling the rest of the population. And the Sumerians worship everything. They worshipped the ground that they walked on, they worshipped rocks, they worshipped trees, they worshipped whatever they could worship, as long as it was not anything devoted to the Creator. And so then they also gave them politics. Now, when you look historically at ancient Samaria, the first king who was made a god is Nimrod. And the scriptures say Nimrod was a mighty hunter in opposition to Yahweh. That's why there was even a saying that went along with that. But that's all the scriptures say. Historically, he rises to power. He gains power by first killing lions, tigers, and bears that are invading villages, so he becomes a mighty hunter, and then he starts hunting people and starts building cities. So, well, he started building cities, then hunting people. So he started building walled cities as protection and as control, and he built cities from Babylon all the way up to Syria. As a matter of fact, Nineveh was the westernmost of his kingdoms, and the Ninevites were the most bloodthirsty people of all of the Sumerians. But anyway, when you go back and you look historically, Nimrod rises to power. He becomes king of the then-known world, and he becomes the god of the sun. On the way home from one of his conquests, he meets an Erechite woman by the name of Syrianus, who is a prostitute, and she applies her trade very well because he makes her his consort. She rises to second in power, becomes the goddess of the earth, goddess of the moon, goddess of the stars, and she has Nimrod murdered. Interesting, she has him murdered actually on a New Year's celebration. He becomes the sacrificial lamb. They tear him apart and eat him raw. So one historical account goes. After Nimrod's death, she becomes pregnant, and she claims the child is Nimrod incarnate, or whoever, and she names the child Tammuz, and now he becomes the first of the star gods. And the same story, or versions of it, are carried down through every religion on the face of the earth. The two biggest religions are, number one, sun worship. Everything is geared around the sun, the god of Nimrod. Now, as a common sun symbol is a six-sided star. It's also the star of Molech.
It's kind of interesting. Somebody pointed out to me. I said, why would Christianity adopt the symbol of the instrument of torture used to kill their Savior? Why would we even have a cross? And they said, well, it ain't the cross that they're worshiping. If you look on the Catholic literature and the Catholic icons, the sun is behind the cross. So we're really worshiping the sun, and they ain't talking about Jesus there.
Yeah, Jesus is the dead man on the stick that the sun god conquered.
Yes. Interesting.
Your Savior is dead. Our Savior is the sun who kills your Savior. You see, and they've got everybody, they've got the masses believing that, oh, you're worshiping Jesus. No, you're worshiping Lucifer, the sun god, Satan, the deceiver, or the devil, the slanderer and the deceiver. But, now we're getting into the religious sense. We're dealing actually with an interdimensional being. Interestingly enough, when you read the account, it refers to, in Ezekiel, in talking about the king of Sidon and the king of Tyre, it's actually, these are metaphors for Satan himself, and it makes the reference to the covering cherub of Eden. Now think about a son of the true God who got the privilege of becoming the covering cherub of a brand new life form, the children of God. Now you see, there's one situation here. The children of God can biologically reproduce and create more children of God. Ooh, think about this. The whole thing with Jesus as coming to earth. Now, wait a minute. We know he came to earth. Where was he before? In the heavens? Oh, so that means what? He was an extraterrestrial? Oh, no, he's the Son of God. Well, wait a minute. Where was he? Was he on earth? No, he was in the heavens. Well, that makes him an extraterrestrial. And who came to announce his birth? Gabriel. Another extraterrestrial is linked back to the book of Daniel, who talks about more extraterrestrials in the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece.
Now, let me stop you for a second, because I've been demonized pretty much for 20 years for starting the militia or whatever. But 45 years ago, I wrote some science fiction about a Atlantean civilization that was worldwide, and the Atlanteans had what we call UFOs. I call them Earth ships. And they built a few of them. One was called the Olympus. One was called the Ra. One was called Heaven. And the co-captain, or the first mate on the Earth ship Heaven, with the captain, Tetragrammaton Lord, when the Earth was destroyed by what I call the conjunction, what Volotsky called the conjunction, when Mars and Venus came too close to Earth, when Tiamat was destroyed, it became the asteroid belt. They built these Earth ships to survive. And in my fiction book, Lucifer was kicked out of heaven because the god, the captain of the Earthship Heaven, went insane and created the religions to enslave the masses, and Lucifer wanted to set them free. Now, after 40 years of study, I'm not sure that I'm that far off.
No, the truth is out there, Clayton, and when you start to feel it at the soul level, you start to understand. Especially if you've gone through anything like a near-death experience. It's like, whoa, you mean we're conscious after the body dies? Yeah, how about that? Fear not those who kill the body, but fear him who can kill both body and soul. Whoa, that adds a new dimension. So where does our soul go? Interestingly enough, when you read Genesis 9:5, it says, God, Yahweh himself says, I shall ask back the soul from every living creature. From man himself I shall ask back his soul. Now, that's pretty much what I experienced when I had my near-death experience. One second they were wheeling me down a hospital corridor. The next second I was out of my body watching them wheel my body down a hospital corridor, and I could feel myself being pulled away from my body. I had no control over what was going on, except that I was in protest because I had just started a new chapter in my life, and bang, it's over. And when I stopped looking at my body and finally said, oh, okay, well, let's see what death is all about, and my focus changed. Now, my consciousness was enveloped in some sort of a material which the last time I looked was just the slightest little wisp coming up out of my chest. And I was being pulled, when I changed my focus where I was going, I was physically being pulled into the great white light, this great white orb of energy, pure dynamic energy, and I was being sucked right into it. And then it stopped.
I've seen the same thing, and again, they just sent me back. You know, your work's not done here. Get back. And I was sent back, and I saw the light. I was going down the light, and I heard footsteps in the hallway. They told me my mother had been contacted, told I wasn't going to make it, and so I wanted to see her one more time, so I came back.
Well, whatever the reason. Now here's an interesting thing. Another situation that I found myself in. This was 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. I was actually in a coma in Westchester County Hospital, Westchester, New York. And while I was in a coma, an entity came to me and said, come with me. And the next thing I knew, my consciousness left my body with this entity. Now, not my life force, my consciousness. And I was looking down at my fiance giving birth to our child in real time. And once the baby was born, I never knew whether it was boy or girl, just that it was born, I was put back in my body. And I remember laying there in an unconscious state. Now, when you're in a coma, you're in delta. Your brain is at the operating speed of delta, which is from 0 to 4 cycles per second. Delta is where we do our deep dreaming at. It is where we have out-of-body experiences at. It is where, well, I would say deep dreaming, lucid dreaming, when dreams are like real. Yeah. Well, maybe they are, and we're just not realizing that they are real. But this, when I came out of the coma, but I couldn't tell you how many hours later it was, but I came out of the coma, my mother was standing over me, and the first words out of my mouth were, Mom, go make a phone call, the baby was born. And the woman had the most confused look on her face, but then her expression changed, and she said, okay, in a very reassuring way. And I went unconscious again for some time. When I came to, she was standing over me, and she said, congratulations, you have a son. So it's interesting. Who is the entity that should come with me? And I got to see the birth of my youngest child. I thought that was fantastic. So we're not alone in this. There are good guys out there, but now we have to decipher the good from the bad and understand what's going on. And here's the thing, I was taught biblical history and biblical prophecy, and I was taught exopolitics. But the one thing I had to go search out on my own, and where I got my secular education in, is science. And that all started with an anomaly that happened, a paradox that happened in my life at the age of 9. It said, okay, you also have to learn science as well. And that was the first time I saw something in the future and then actually lived through a dream. I had a dream, and a week later, I lived through what I dreamt. So I ran home terrified, told my mom, Ma, I just had a dream that came true. She said, oh, that's nice, honey. It's time for you to go to bed. I'm like, well, what? It's the most important thing that had ever happened. My little life up until then just happened, and my mom sent me to bed. And that caused a paradox. It was like, how was this able to happen? How did I see into the future? How did Samuel could do this, the prophets could do this, the biblical records of doing this, why am I doing it? And the spiritual answer was just shut off. So I turned to science. So I grew up literally with the Bible in one hand and test tube in the other. Never, ever learning religion. So it was only a natural occurrence that I put both of them together, and that's how I wrote Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon. Now here's the thing. When you look at the historical record and you look at what is written in the Bible, forget the dates, forget one day for this, another day for that. They're not 24-hour days, they're time periods. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Big bang. Now when you look at string theory states, it's actually M theory. M theory states that we live in a multiverse with membranes. Each universe is essentially a membrane in itself. And when two membranes touch, they set off an electrical charge, which, Big Bang, which lasts about 1 trillion years. Newsflash, we're in the teenage years of this universe. It's approximately 15 billion years old. Scientists say it's growing at an exponential rate. They don't understand why, but at the rate that it's growing, it's going to tear itself apart in several hundred billion years. Eventually, well, according to string theory, the whole event horizon to event horizon takes about 1 trillion years. So we have about another 985 billion years to go. When we get to 900 billion years, I'll start worrying about this. Now, think about that. We are living within a universe which is a teenager.
Yep.
And when you go from event horizon to event horizon, it's just born. It's a newborn. It's 15 billion years of 1 trillion years. It's got another 985 billion years to go. Now, does that put things in perspective?
Yes, I think so, but...
Now, here's the thing. There can be life forms that live outside of this dimension. And indeed, string theory says that in order for our little three-dimensional teenage universe to be here, or infant universe to be here, there needs to be at least 7 other spatial planes to support it. Now, the interesting thing, the math also says that those 7 other spatial planes can do just fine by themselves. They don't need us at all. They can exist perfectly, just the way they are. However, without those, we do not exist in the physical world. Now, when you start looking at the physical world, what's really physical? Nothing's physical. At the atomic structure, there is one physical part of matter for 4 trillion, well, depending on the actual atom, 4 trillion, standard is 4 trillion parts of empty space. Now, could you put one pebble in between, drop it in between a space that's 4 trillion times the size of it? You would need something approximately the size of the known universe to know it in comparison. Think of it. Could you hit the galaxy with a pebble? Think about that.
You know,
it's all space.
You bring up something, and you know, I've told people, I believe in God, I just don't believe he looks like Charlton Heston.
No, you know, here's the thing. If you want to know who the yeah, exactly. We actually live within the body of what we commonly call God. When we say, oh, you know, God this, God that, whatever. No, wait, there only is one, and we are living within the body of God. Now explain this.
I believe that God is, exactly as you say, God is the force that determines our DNA. I think it's an intelligent selection. It's a conscious choice. God holds the atoms together. When they get down and analyze what holds an atom together, you only got 2 answers, magic and God. And I've asked people, if you're omniscient and omnipotent, what are you? You're the only one of your kind in the universe. What are you? And the answer I come up with is bored to tears. So,
and that's why he created us.
that's right. We're his entertainment. Shakespeare knew.
Absolutely.
Shakespeare
I've said for
knew.
years, the only reason God keeps me around is because he loves my stand-up.
Well, let's see how Peter and Clay get along. Let's put them together. Let's see what happens. We are his entertainment. The whole world's a stage, according to Shakespeare, and I believe that.
It goes deeper, Clay. It goes deeper. Let me explain this. And I'm going to explain this two different ways. I'm going to explain it the simple way first, and we're going to use fractal technology. Now, fractal technology is the repeating of patterns within nature. Now, Clay, I promise you right now, you are host to hundreds of millions, if not billions, of life forms on and in your body. We have bacterium from the tip of our hair down to the bottom of our feet, from our lips to our anus, inside and out. We are the host to all sorts of life forms. Now, occasionally, we never pay these life forms any attention. They just go on their merry way, doing what they're doing. Now, can you imagine two bacterium sitting in your gut, Clay, and one bacterium says, "You really think Clay exists?" And the other one says, "Nah, he's just a myth."
Well, it seems to me that what you're really talking about here is our cells. If you blow up one of our cells to so they're visible to the naked eye, you're basically talking about a whole system here, a self-replicating, producing system here that if you blew it up in some kind of scale, it'd be the size of a city floating around in your
the size
bloodstream.
of a galaxy. We would be the size, if bacterium was if a bacterium was, like, let's say, 6 foot tall, we would have to blow the human body up to the size of the galaxy.
Now,
and it would be more like fleas on a dog. Hey, do you think Rover exists? Nah, he's just a myth. You know, or Rover becomes the god. Rover's our god. You know,
can't see the forest for the trees, huh?
Can't see the dog for the hair.
Now let me ask you, what do we do here? Knowing this, I mean, this is kind of what I've asked myself. I discovered the government intrigue. I discovered the scam of the bankers back in 1930. Yeah, we're gonna print your money, but we're gonna loan it to you. Our founding fathers warned us, if you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, then the banks and the corporations that spring them around them will leave your children homeless in the land you conquered. Now, once you realize this, and once you understand how evil these entities can be, and whether you call them Zionists, Jews, aliens, troglodytes, whatever you want to call them, when you understand how evil that they can be, you really got a choice. We're born into this world. God created us, put us in here, motivated us with a spark of His divinity that we call the soul, we call ESP, we call, whatever you want to...
Our consciousness.
And we've got the choice.
Permeates everything.
We've got freedom of choice, so we can decide whether we want to be good or evil. We make that decision. When I saw, go ahead.
Well, Clay, you bring up an interesting point, and really the answer, when you look at it and understand how it plays out, the answer is in the scriptures. Now, there is a version that the Anunnaki write, and essentially, according to the Sumerian cuneiform text, the Anunnaki created us out of the lower life forms of the earth. Well, here's a newsflash. One single strand of DNA they have now found contains, you could replicate all life on this planet with one complete strand of human DNA. Which means that if you were a genetic engineer, you could take one blood cell containing one complete human genome and go to another planet and use that information to recreate every life form
that you need to replicate Earth. How about that? Now, when you go back and you look at how creation comes about, first you have all this geological stuff that happened, and then all of a sudden God says, let the seas put forth swarms, and the heavens put forth flying creatures, and the earth put forth the grasses, and all these things happen. Now, let's just back up here for a second. Before I get into this, I want to just go back, and I want to talk about the fractal technology of who God is. You see, when you break things down according to what it says, what we know, within Revelation, Yahweh himself says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Before me there was nothing, and after me there will be nothing. Event horizon, before me there was nothing. Well, bang, all of a sudden something happened, and after me there will be nothing. End of event horizon. So now, we also know by the laws of physics, one of the basic laws of physics, you can neither create nor destroy energy, you can only transform it. If both statements are true, then at one time, the only thing which could have existed is pure dynamic energy, hence the God particle. Energy in its most pure form or state. And we know that this energy is conscious because we're conscious. We know how to be intelligent because guess what? We are intelligent. And so now we have to ask what changed this pure dynamic energy into everything that we understand around us in the physical world, plus those other spatial planes which we know very, very little about. And it had to come up with a concept, and that concept is actually explained in 1 John 5:8. It says God is love. The energy came up with a concept. What a great concept. The more you give, the better you feel. The more you get, the better you feel. You can love your dog, you can love your car, you can love your kids, you can love that significant other like no one else can. You can love all of your relatives. It works on so many different levels, and you feel so good. Now, think about this. We get to a point where we have the children of God, who, if they had perfect DNA, that DNA would perfectly replicate the body. That a human healthy woman is born with 400,000 eggs in her ovaries. If her body never died, and she used all of those eggs, she would have to live for 35,000 years. If you wanted to populate planets, wow, what a life form to go do it with. And if it was all done on family and done with love, by the time all of the Earth-like planets were populated, this whole universe would just glow of love. Right now, it's boring and empty.
You know, do you know what the definition of love? Love is basically an anagram. You know what it stands for?
I'm listening.
Your level of vibrational energy.
There you go.
The more you love, the closer you are to the deity, to the entity that we call God.
And so think about this. We feel that love within ourselves, and it irradiates out from our chest because all those little hormones are being pumped into our heart, and we feel really good. And we just love being in love. Think about that feeling on every Earth-like planet, and there are hundreds of billions of them throughout the universe. Wow! Could that be the prime directive? Well, folks, you got to start somewhere. Might as well be right here on Earth. That's why we were kidnapped. If humans worshiped Satan and made him the god of this world, oh, gee, guess what? That may have already happened. And that virus was allowed, that cancerous virus was allowed to get off this planet, it would infect the whole entire galaxy.
So
and
we've been
universe.
Quarantined here. We've been quarantined on this planet because this evil is alive and growing. It is a cancer on mankind.
I just read a report. Actually, I read two different reports, which pretty much said the same thing within the last month, and that was that the dumbing down of society has been a success, and that people are weaker and less intelligent than they were 50 years ago. And it's interesting, when you look at what is being fed the masses, it's cool to hold up devil horn signs. Now, go do a Google search on politicians and devil horn signs and go see who holds up those signs.
That's
Go
right.
see who worships the devil horn.
Are you talking about the University of Texas fans?
No. Longhorn's something else.
Hook 'em horrors, hook 'em horrors.
It's a different hand sign. It's a different hand sign.
Okay.
Okay, Pat. Nothing against the great state of Texas or the people therein, or anybody who's a fan of Texas University. It's a different hand sign.
Okay.
Now, so if I recall, the hand sign for the Texas Longhorns is the thumb and pinky spread. Is that correct?
I have no idea. I've never gone to a football game and don't watch them on television. I just can't handle the pharmaceutical commercials.
They just will cure you if it doesn't kill you first.
I can imagine. I mean, you talk about them wanting to kill us. I mean, if you watch a Super Bowl, you see about every other commercial as far as pharmaceutical. In the first 30 seconds of the commercial, they tell you how it could kill you, how it could cause sterility, how it could cause dementia, how it could, you know. And I'm asking myself, why would anybody want to take this? Why would anybody want to take one of these pills?
Yeah, it's like, seriously? That is one of my biggest objections with allowing pharmaceutical companies to advertise on TV.
20 years ago, they weren't allowed to do that, did they?
Yeah, they took the cigarette and alcohol commercials off, and they put pharmaceuticals in its place. Oh, we're pushing drugs to the mass. You know, I get a kick out of it. They say, oh, marijuana's bad. Gateway drugs are bigger and better things. Whoa, wait a minute. We're not talking about gateway drugs. There are more alcoholics on the face of this planet than pot smokers any day. And once you start looking into the medicinal benefits of cannabis, guess what? It cures cancer. Yeah, it eases a lot of pain if you smoke it, but if you eat it in its raw state, it will cure cancer. If you make extracts of it, it will cure cancer, at least in 80% of the cases.
Well, you know what, I mean, this is kind of a touchy subject with me, because first of all, I did a year and a half in prison writing books when cannabis was a 99-year sentence in Texas. And second of all, I was really excited when we finally succeeded in getting medical marijuana in Arizona. But
you know, Kling,
I couldn't get medical marijuana because I'm too healthy. I don't need a doctor. Why would I pay a doctor? Why would I bribe a doctor to get a prescription for something God gave me?
You know, I was just going to bring this point up. When you look at Genesis and the creation account of man, or human, modern human, and I'll address this situation about evolution in a second here because it's important. When you look at it, he says, let us, plural, us make man in our image. So now, is our physical image in the image of God? No, it's not. Our physical image is dictated by the planet on which we live. If you took a newborn infant and moved it to a different planet, it would physically look different because of the environmental structures of that planet and the mass and gravity of the planet. So our physical body, and you look at the account in Genesis 2, it says that Adam was formed, or the man was formed from the dust of the ground, and every scientist will tell you that we are star children formed from the from stardust, essentially, which make up the elements of the ground. And then it says the breath of life was put into the man. The soul, which God would ask back when he died. Now, you have a perfect human being, which is genetically perfect, which can turn around and replicate itself. Our bodies completely rebuild themselves every 7 years, our brain every 10 years. I guess it takes a little bit longer because the brain cells, the old brain cells have to teach the new brain cells what they know. But anyway, so every 10 years, we are a totally new person. The only thing which hasn't changed is our soul. Our soul stays constant. Our body keeps changing. You don't believe me? You know, watch a child grow. When's the last time you saw your grandkids? Oh, well, go visit them this week. They look different. They're bigger, I promise.
I've also wondered, I mean, what I wrote after studying for 45 years, that raises the question, do I have just an active imagination, or do I have a real good memory? Have I been here before? And personally, I like the 21st century better than the first. I think burning bushes are passe today. We got the internet.
Yeah. Clayton, I tend to agree with you. It's like, boy, if we could stop this mess right here, it might be able to be repaired with time. But damn, how do you stop it? It's going to take something on in another earthly level to stop it, and that's pretty much what we're facing. You see, we're not in this alone. We're prisoners, and the jailers are about to be captured and done away with, and the prison is about to be opened, and the whole prison system will be destroyed. Seriously.
Well, I wrote books about that.
Not just on a state level. I'm talking on the global prison planet level. This paradigm that's coming is going to change. Now, we're going to see a lot of changes in the near future. Dramatic changes. But, I want to tie this back into, you brought up a very good point with love being in the right vibration, because this is important. In our creation, when we were created in alpha. With the perfect human species, the modern human species was created in the alpha resonance, where love resides. You cannot make love in the beta response of the brain. The beta operating speed runs from about 16 up to 22, 24 cycles per second. That's where the fight and flight syndrome sits. Now, when you look at the creation account, they were naked. And you go to Genesis 2. God says it's not good for the man to be alone, so I'm going to make a helper for him. Now what happens? A physical operation is performed, a tissue sample is removed, and a woman is made from the genetic material and brought before the man, and the man says at last, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one was taken from man. Adam knew that Eve was genetically engineered from his own body. So now, and that's the difference between the creation and the genetic engineering. But they were probably both done by the genetic engineers of not just Earth, but the whole entire universe. You go back to Genesis, the first chapter, where God says, let these things happen, and that brings us to the Cambrian period. When you read Genesis 1, it says God's active force moved to and fro over the watery deep. Okay, nothing happens according to science for about 3 billion years now. They used to think it was 1 billion, but now they've stretched it out to about 3 billion years. That the only thing that is on the face of this planet is bacterium. Simple single-cell life forms. By the end of the Precambrian period, you have simple jellyfish and zooplankton and phytoplankton. That's it. And then all of a sudden, there's an explosion of life. More genetic information is downloaded onto this planet than has ever been on this planet since. There has only been extinction-level events since the Cambrian period. Now think about that. Where did all that genetic information come from? Science doesn't have an explanation. It exploded. It all came about at the same time. More life than has ever been here since. Now you got to look at genetic engineering, because that's exactly what happened in Genesis, the 2nd chapter. So who were the genetic engineers? Maybe the covering cherub of Eden had something to do with it, who turned around and said, you know what? I liked them better when they were pets, because now they're our equals. They are the same as we are, only they can reproduce. We can't. Let's knock them back down. Let's destroy their DNA, knock them back down to Cro-Magnon man, and keep them as pets until we can have them build nanobot bodies for ourselves.
You know, one of the things that I've wondered about the Jews or the Edomites or what the Bible calls Satan's children, maybe they are jealous of us because we have something they don't, a soul.
Well, I want to make a distinction here.
Okay.
Now, there's a complete distinction between being Jewish and being Zionist. Being Jewish or Hebrew is.
Hold on, we gotta take a quick station break. We'll be right back with Peter Kling. Yeah, I said they hide behind the Jews. So we'll talk about that 1 minute here. Warm up your coffee.
Discover what's really going on in the news. What mainstream media won't tell you. Are you frustrated with your elected politicians? Get the news behind the news at truthradio.com. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs on demand. Listen when you want to. truthradio.com. The truth is out there. All you have to do.
Years ago, a man by the name of James Collier made a video called Was It Only a Paper Moon? That VHS video has been in the library of Truth Radio for many, many years, and I have a DVD of it ready to send to you if you'd like to view it. If you've never seen Was It Only a Paper Moon, I promise you, this is a mind bender. This is something that will really make you think. And I'd be glad to send you one if you request it. Our policy is we give, you give. So just give us a chance to get it. And we'll be glad to send you this in the mail. Our address, P.O. Box 344, Nipomo, California, zip code 93444. That's P.O. Box 344, zip code 93444.
Yeah, I like that. I wrote that. O mighty Phoenix, come once more to the eyes of men, from the ancient days of Atlantis, and centuries numbered 10 times 10 times 10. Peter Kling is my guest today, and what about this? You know, people have said, Kling, you just shouldn't call them, you shouldn't talk about the Jews, you ought to call them Zionists. Well, let's see. Was it the Zionists that killed the Tsar and his ministers? Was it the Zionists that killed Jesus? Was it, you know, so, and I almost agree with them, because I think even using the term Jew, which was created in the 18th century by these beings that wanted to develop some kind of relationship with Jesus, although they never came from here according to their own DNA test. They came from the Russia, the Black Sea area, a country called Khazar. And I've said they hide behind the Jews. And I also believe they basically hide behind the Christians. If you call yourself a Judeo-Christian or a Christian Zionist, you might as well say, I'm a satanic Christian, thank you anyway. What about that, Peter?
Well, let's take a look at this first of all, Clayton, because I'm going to give you a real life example. I have a good friend, and I actually we became great friends. I first was introduced to this man by Joshua. And as we became better friends, I found out his actual given name is Vahid Kamal. Now, his father, interestingly enough, is Iranian, and his mother is Jewish. And I asked one day, now this was before 9/11. This was after, the first attempt at blowing up the World Trade Center and all the different problems that were going on back then. And I said, tell me the truth. What's going on over in the Middle East? And he said very, very quietly to me, he said, Peter, he said, it's all politics. He said, we've been living together in peace for hundreds of years. There's never been a problem. He said, there's not a problem between the people. He says, it's politics. Okay. Thank you very much. So let's look at this from a political standpoint. Now, if it's politics, then it's not religion. However, in today's society, they go hand in hand, so to speak, don't they? One kind of takes care of the other. But let's look at it from the political side. So now what's the political force going on in the Middle East? It's really politics. Politics controlled by Zionism. Let's get a good handle on Zionism. Does it really have anything to do with being Hebrew or Jewish? Well, if you go on the internet and you type in Jews against Zion, you will see, especially on YouTube, you'll see YouTube video after YouTube video of Hasidic Jews protesting against the Zionist political movement in Israel and every place else around the world. Now, why are these Hebrews, Orthodox Hebrews, who follow the letter of the law, against Zionism? Well, let's take a look at it. Now, you bring up a very good point about, false Jews. And it actually, in the book of Revelation, it talks about that. Revelation 3:9 says, look, I will make those from the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews, yet are not, but are lying. Look, I will make them come and bow before your feet and make them know that I have loved you. Now, if they changed the Bible, why didn't they change that verse? Oh, maybe they didn't change the Bible. Yeah, now, this I can tell you. They took out God's name or King James took out God's name over 7,000 times. Yahweh, Jehovah, or the correct pronunciation, as I was told by a Christian woman who was of Hebrew descent, who was an expert in ancient Hebrew linguistics. She had a doctorate in it, told me the correct pronunciation for the Hebrew Tetragrammaton would be Yahuwah. So that is the name of the creator of everything. That is the name of the entity, which indeed is the multiverse in which we live, the same as bacterium live within us.
Yeah,
now,
us Texas Cowboys know that for a long time, We get on our horses and ride, we go, Yahoo!
well, it's funny. It's funny in a strange way. Have you ever seen the movie Mars Attacks?
I think so, yes.
It's a parody on alien invasion where a bunch of these clone-looking aliens that kind of have skull-looking heads, but they're all, inside this glass bubble. They come and they attack Earth, and they're destroying the planet. And what saves them? What saves the Earth? The Indian Love Call. I believe that's the name of the song that the old woman was listening to when her earplugs came undone. And it's a yodel which is almost sounding like Yahuwah. And the alien heads explode. Let me tell you something. You want to get rid of extra interdimensional things that go bump in the night. You want to eliminate yourself from any kind of demonic possession. I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Bill Bean who learned the power of the name of Father Yahweh. He's been getting rid of these poltergeist demonic forces, using that name for quite some time and relieving people of their problems. I've done the same thing, and you can do it, and there's two names that work. Well, any version of the name Yahuwah, which would be Yahweh or Jehovah or whatever country you're from in your common tongue, or Jesus Christ, will now gain control over the interdimensional forces. If we're ever invaded by a cloned army of these things, remember this, seriously, it's really no joke. Remember God's name, because it all comes down to what it says in Acts, that the Second chapter, the 21st verse, all those calling on the name of Yahuwah or Yahweh or Jehovah shall be saved. It's a sync up with our soul and the soul of the dynamic energy which controls the whole multiverse. And that's where the vibrational part comes in. Now, let's just go back here to the synagogue of Satan. There's a scripture which is probably the most overlooked scripture in the whole entire Bible, and that is Acts the 7th chapter, the 42nd and 43rd verse. Why every pastor isn't reading this from his pulpit, I don't know. Yes, I do. They're all lying to you. That's why they don't tell you this part. This is the account of the disciple Stephen standing before the Jewish high court in the 1st century. And he quotes the prophet Amos, and he says, and this is Amos essentially, or Stephen quoting Amos, speaking in the first person. First Stephen starts out and he says this: so God turned away from them and handed them over to sacred service to the army of heaven. To the army of heaven? So it's sacred service to the army of heaven? Interesting. And he goes on and he says, just as it is written in the book of the prophets, this is where he quotes Amos, it was not to me that you made offerings and sacrifice for those 40 years in the wilderness, was it, O house of Israel? But it was the tent of Molech and the star of the god Raphan that you took up the images that you made to worship them. So I will deport you far beyond Babylon. Now, this happened when the Babylonians, Amos foretold this, and around 600 BC, the Babylonians came in and hauled off the inhabitants of Jerusalem back to Babylon, and the Medes and Persians came in and hauled them off to Persia before they were finally restored back to Israel. And then in the 1st century, Titus came in, and after he murdered about 2 million Jews, he took 93,000 captive, the elite of Jerusalem, back to Rome as slaves. Now let's see, who were the elite of Jerusalem? Oh, the same people who Stephen accused of being Molech worshippers. So now, what's the star of Raphan, and who is this Molech? Well, Molech is actually a title. It means terrible god king. And now, the first Molech was the god Set. That's why there's a link back to Egypt. It's talking about when the Israelites left Egypt, they were still worshiping Molech. They didn't give up their Molech worship. And when you look at the history of Israel, they've always had a problem with Molech worshiping. And mostly because of the Canaanites. That's why they were supposed to wipe all the Canaanites out, because the Canaanites were Baal worshippers, who was actually also the most famous Molech. The star of Raphan is the 6-sided star with 6 points and 6 pyramids. It's also known as the star of Molech. And hence, these Molech worshippers that were taken out of Judea by General Titus, that later became Emperor Titus, they basically had all bought their freedom and assimilated them by the end of the 1st century, and assimilated themselves within European society through the next 2,000 years actually. But 1,000 years ago, an interesting little group came up known as the Knights Templar, who go back to the Middle East, capture Jerusalem, do a lot of digging, and all of a sudden transform Europe and become the base for the banking system today. They also start what seems to be a new religion, and they become the 2nd most powerful entity in all of Europe, next to the Catholic Church itself. So the Catholic Church bans them for heresy. What were they doing? Well, everything that they were doing was probably right. If they were Molech worshippers, they brought the sacred scrolls that their ancestors had buried, all the sacred writings back that they had kept from the times that they were in Egypt, all the way through, all of those ancient teachings they brought back and started inculcating in their children. And hence, when the Khazars got involved in the banking system, they were smart enough to understand how to take it over and how to rule this planet, and they started worshiping Lucifer directly, or Satan directly. Hence, they became the biggest fans of Molech on this planet. And indeed, it's all tied together. When you look at the three main religions, and this is obviously why I was told never get involved in religion. The three main religions are symbolized by the three gods of ancient Babylon. Nimrod, Sirianus, and Tammuz. Nimrod by the star of Molech, or the sun symbol. Sirianus by the Ankh cross, which becomes the cross, which is an actual male phallic symbol. And the star god Tammuz, which is symbolized by the crescent moon and the star. So Judaism / Zionism now, because they're almost hand in hand in some cases, but you can't totally bind them together.
Well, I've said
Zionism, which has become a religion.
Peter, I have said I don't care who your grandmother slept with.
It's what we do today.
It's what we do today. It's the fruit of your actions. And I got one guy on the chat room. He goes by Rabbi Ted, and when I kick him off for pretending to be a rabbi, he comes back under something else. But he's never donated. He's never bought anything. He's never bought a copy of the magazine. He's never helped in any way. And so I just kick him out. I mean, I don't need to be talking to people like that. And one of the problems that I've got right now, and that I'm working on, is I really don't know what happened during the accident. I've said, maybe maybe I'm wrong on some of these things. Maybe I don't know what happened, but suddenly I'm just more isolated, and is that something from my actions, or is this something from an external? Is this war I've talked about for 20 years? Am I a victim in the war? And is the war a psychological warfare? Is that why and is it a battle of principalities, not necessarily people? I don't know exactly where this is coming from, and I don't know. I've done everything that I've done here has been to try to keep what happened at Waco from happening to the American people in general.
That's a valiant effort, and I have to say, something hit a chord in you which saw grave injustice, and that there are certain things that just activate us in different ways, where all of a sudden, wow, we wake up. Something triggers an awakening. Now, most of the time, it's something like a near-death experience, or you got to meet your guardian angel, or something happened which made you stand up and say, wow, the world just changed for me, but it changed on an internal level. Something kickstarts us. Now, what happens is that we can actually, and this was a report I read about 6 months ago, that we can actually change our DNA by our thoughts. In other words, we can have either positive or negative effects on our own DNA, just how we think. And by doing that, we start to waken up certain genes or certain parts of our DNA, which then make us more awake to the fact that, wow, are we really different from the world, or is the world just asleep at the switch? And then we realize that, no, we're different. There's a reason why we understand things the way that we do. And there's a reason why we think the things that we do. Now, in your case, Clayton, a lot of what you did, now, you got this 3-month lapse. You don't know or remember what information or where you were, where your consciousness was for 3 months. This is all. You could have been traveling the multiverse and been in communication with all sorts of different life forms during those 3 months that were keeping you alive. And when you came back, you were changed. It's without doing regression meditation, it's very difficult to know. But you can do it if you wanted to. It's just it takes some time, it takes some effort, and you got to meditate. But it's changing the speed at which our brain operates. Now, here's an interesting thing. As the speed of your brain slows down, the more conscious you become. The problem is when we slow our brains down, most of the time we do it when we're at night when we go to bed, and so we don't really become conscious, we become unconscious. But if you could do it, when you meditate in a conscious state, and I suggest everyone do this 2 or 3 times a day, or take the time out and pray. And don't pray for forgiveness. You didn't do anything wrong. Pray that you might be able to be another person tomorrow. You know, if you did something wrong today or yesterday, guess what? God doesn't hold it in account. It's what you're doing today and tomorrow. You know, you can change your future right now, immediately, by doing something different. Doing something you haven't done before will change the paradigm of your future immediately. But we all resist change. We like it right in our comfort zone. Even if we're in a place that's not a good place, at least it's comfortable. We don't have to put up with that. We can have whatever we want. But everything has its price. You have to turn around and spend the time to create and create what you want. You have to work on it, like written in the scriptures. Faith without work is dead. So if you're not physically working toward achieving your goals, what's the sense in having a goal? But we're all fired in different ways. And when you're fired in a positive manner, and you're looking for truth, and you're seeking it, you find it. It resonates with you. It hits the right chord. It becomes, oh, I can understand that now. And that's kind of what we're trying to get on. It's hitting the right vibration. We are forced to live in this beta state of mind, this fight or flight. The worst thing that you can possibly do is give somebody with freedom of will the fight or flight syndrome. Now they got the freedom of will to go out and kick somebody's butt. Now, going back to the original paradigm, when you look at the creation account, both Adam and Eve were naked. They knew it. Nobody walks around naked in beta. In order to get naked with somebody, you usually go down to alpha, a state of love. You leave that fight or flight syndrome. Nobody fights naked. You get into the state of love. And that's when people start getting naked. But now when you read the account, after they ate this fruit, which probably had a virus in it, which destroyed part of the DNA, and I had a long talk with a genetic engineer about this, who was fresh out of college and just got her master's degree, and she concurs. It's very possible that part of the human genome was erased. There's really no way of telling, because it's gone. And so now that, along with that, they could have had the beta programming installed, because the first thing that they did was realize, hey, we're naked. And then they heard the voice of God and they became afraid. Our flight syndrome, they were now in the beta operating speed of the mind. Now they had free will and they could kill. They knew right from wrong. And they also knew that they were no longer perfect and they were no longer the children of God.
Now, talk about this DNA. The Bible tells us that Adam, that Noah, that all of these patriarch Methuselah lived 900, 1,000 years. My friend David Koss, that I believe you know, talks about reversing the genetic structure or the molecular structure of your water or your coffee with a simple motion that's very much like prayer. And he believes that if you do that, you live longer, you look younger, you do all of that. And I don't really doubt that, but perhaps this DNA meddling here, they did not want us as conscious, aware, perfect humans to live that long. So they've altered our DNA to the point that we're lucky if we make 100.
Yeah, pretty much, and that's exactly what it says within the scriptures themselves, that the lifespan of man was shortened, and it was shortened at the same time as the last alien invasion, which happened prior to the flood, which is interestingly enough the same time period as the Mayans would classify as one long Baktun ago, 5,125 years ago. The book of Enoch writes the account. There's not much mention of it now. You get the story of Noah and the ark, but here's the thing: we know Noah's genealogy. We do not know the genealogy of Noah's wife, nor do we know the genealogy of any of the wives of Noah's sons. So there's a vastly different gene pool, and we don't know what part of that gene pool may have contained contaminated, let's call it serpent seed. And so now we do know that there are two genetic strains based on Genesis 3:15, where it says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. The woman is not Eve in this case. The woman is God's woman, or essentially the physical and metaphysical system of things that are under his control. The serpent seed comes from the covering cherub of Eden, who may have been in charge of the genetic engineering of life on every planet within this dimension. It's interesting that there's this alleged alien force. It's called the Galactic Federation of Light, which says that they are our creators and that they are led by Lucifer. And I thought, oh crap, here it comes. You know, it's like, here comes the biblical story, and it's one that you can't, that I found very difficult to argue against, except for one thing. I forgot about the immortals. And every channeler, you ever get a channeler on your show, a channeler that claims, or a person that claims to channel interdimensionals or extraterrestrials or people from one galaxy or another, bring up the immortals. I did. I do every time that I get a chance to talk to a channeler. Bring up the immortals. And this is a statement I've never had disagreement on. Every one of these people agree that when the immortals show up, every knee will bend, both alien and human, or they'll meet their fate. That's all there is to it. Every single one will agree, but not one of them will channel immortals. Why? Because immortals don't channel.
Well, that's interesting. You just kind of described my character of Lucifer that I put in my books. He was immortal and did come back in different bodies at different times, but the soul remained the same. Again, just fiction.
Look at the account in Job. In Job, the first chapter, essentially God calls a meeting. All the sons of God show up, including Satan, and he comes right along with him, and God says, where have you been? And what does Satan say? I've been on the earth, walking around in it. And God says, oh, have you seen my servant Job? And Satan says, yeah, I've seen Job. You know, so he was here, he knew what was going on, and then he was called to an interdimensional meeting. So, yeah, it's right there, black and white.
In my fiction book on Lucifer, which I've got the screenplay up there, you can get a little bit of that and a sense of it by checking out the screenplay. I think that actually cost you $10 now, but in my story, Lucifer rides a Harley.
That's funny. It's funny from the interesting perspective is that I believe it's on Family Guy, the adult cartoon, which is now played at hours that all the kids can watch. One of the characters in there is the Super Devil who rides a Harley. Yeah, you no longer have to worry about the devil. Now you got to worry about the Super Devil, and he rides a Harley. So look out.
Well, it's you know, I think there's a lot in what you said. You know, with me, when I saw what happened at Waco, I was just I almost went insane. Why are they letting this happen? Why are they doing this? Where's the Texas Rangers? Where's the Sheriff's Department? And I listened to the 9/11 calls, the 911 calls from inside the compound, not a compound. I saw the films from inside a living room filled with women and children that had 50 caliber bullet holes in the ceiling. And I told my wife, I can't sit back and watch something like this happen again without trying to do something.
Yeah, it's man's injustice to man. You know, it's interesting. The original commandment was to have domination over the earth, not over, and the wildlife on it, not over each other. And that's why I said if we could get rid of the beta operating system of the mind, if there was a way just to go in and erase the beta operating system, war and murder would end instantly, because we'd all have to be in that operating speed of love.
Well, you know, I've been demonized and demonized and demonized, libeled and slandered, listed as armed and dangerous, listed as false patriots, listed in guide to right-wing extremists, put out by the FBI. And, you know, shortly after that happened, I walked into the FBI office in Albuquerque, laid a bundle of magazines down. I said, I thought I'd just drop these off. I got enough here for every agent you got in the building. I just wanted you guys to know who I am. And they said, oh, we know who you are, Clay. But the moral of that story is I walked out of the FBI office. You know, obviously I wasn't arrested. And when I called up the governor and the chief of the state police, the governor said, don't worry about it, Clay. And the chief of police said, don't worry about it, Clay. I said, well, that's easy for you guys to say. I think they're arranging death by cop. And the chief of police said, Clay, I've been reading your magazine for 10 years. You don't have anything to worry about for me or any of my men. I said, well, what about the cop in Podunk, Socorro, New Mexico? I mean, if he thinks I'm a dangerous guy. He said, don't worry about it, Clay. The governor recalled all of those booklets from the FBI from every police station in New Mexico. But as soon as I went to Arizona, somebody tried to kill me.
Now, if you're protected, you have nothing to worry about, Clay.
Well,
they've been trying to kill me for a long time, and I'm playing with entities on an interdimensional level at times, and they still haven't succeeded. So, you know, we keep up the fine work. Clay, I do want to add in one thing. When it comes to anti-Semitism, we have to be really careful about the whole situation. Because being against Zionism isn't being against Judaism or isn't being an anti-Semite. You can be against Zionism the same way that you could be against Nazism or communism. And here's the fact. Zionism first infiltrated our government at the judicial level under Woodrow Wilson, who was being blackmailed by, guess who? The Zionists. Now, when you do the history, when you look into the history, you go back to the first Congress of Zionism, which was held in, I believe, Basel, Switzerland,
yes,
in 1898. No, 97. Sorry. That was 1898, 97, one or the other. And that meeting was originally supposed to be held in Munich, Germany. Now, the reason why they moved it is that the word got out that the purpose for the meeting was to relocate Jews back to Palestine, back to the Holy Land. And the local population of Orthodox Jews went up in protest. The protest was so bad in Munich that they changed the venue of the first Congress of Zion to Basel, Switzerland. Now, it's alleged that out of the first Congress of Zion came the Protocol of the Learned Elders of Zion, which I did a excerpt and commentary in my book, Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon. Talk about being demonized? My goodness. A book that should be a bestseller can't make it out of the stall. That may have something to do with the first radio show I did, which was on public network radio out of New York City, which was co-hosted by the producer of Monk, a person in the entertainment industry. I couldn't believe how fast him and his co-host had read through my book, and no doubt they focused on my commentary, considering it's 2 chapters about the protocol. Henry Ford said back in the early 1920s the protocol seemed real to him, and he almost lost Ford Motor Vehicle over it until he retracted his statement. course, on his deathbed, he turned around and recanted his statements and said, "Hey, be careful of the dying," essentially. And I'm shortening his statement up. But when you read the protocol, you read the excerpts in Letters to Earth of the protocol, it reads like a blueprint for the last 100 years. And they're not done yet. Matter of fact, Dr. David Duke, I believe he's a senator, was a senator in Louisiana, is releasing a bound volume of the protocols of the learned elders, a bound illustrated volume of the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. He's doing it in the highest quality that he can. Each book is over $100, and you can start buying them right now. Now you got a senator from Louisiana, I believe it's Louisiana, who's turned around and essentially is doing the same thing I did 5 years ago, 6 years ago. You better find this information out. You better look at it. I paraphrase it and add in the commentary. It's there. Now, that's a lot different than people who are trying to worship their God. There's a difference between people who are trying to control the outcome of every political country, every political entity on the planet, and people who are trying to worship their God.
Well, let me toss this in. This is at the bottom of my Blog Talk Radio description of today's show. In order to put public opinion into our hands, we must bring it into a state of bewilderment by giving expression from all sides to so many contradictory opinions, and for such a length of time as will suffice to make the average person lose their heads in the labyrinth and come to see that the best thing is to have no opinion of any kind in matters political. Protocol number 5.
Be a worker, Ant. Do your job. Shut up. What are you doing on the streets out on the streets after curfew? Why aren't you home watching TV and being programmed? That's how 1984 ended. You know, if we live that paradigm, we're going to die that paradigm. If we don't wake up to the fact, we are going to suffer at the hands of other people. If you do not create your future, someone will be glad to create it for you.
Well, you know what, the interesting thing about the books I wrote 45 years ago that I'm still in the process of editing, because when I wrote them, I described offices filled with IBM Selectric typewriters because computers didn't exist. So I need to kind of bring it up to date a little bit. But
you know, here's an interesting thing, Clay. I just want to point this out. You look at just the difference in technology between back then when those IBM typewriters came out. They were the hottest thing on every secretary in every office wanted one.
Right.
And you know, I'm sure when they entered into an establishment where they were looking at employment at and they saw IBM typewriters sitting there, they probably started to drool. But anyway, yeah, how has technology changed over the past 100 years compared to the last 4,000 years? How do we turn around and gain all this technology so fast in such a short amount of time? That technology has allowed the earth to speak in one language again. Not since the time of the Tower of Babel has the earth spoken in one language.
And, you know, as it is above, so it is below. And I think the internet is really giving the common man access to something only us adepts had for a century or so. It's called the Akashic Records. And suddenly we've got it here at our fingertips. We can pull up, I can find out any information that I want on the computer here, on the internet, pull it right out of the air. There's nothing connecting me to J.P. Morgan's copper lines here, other than my power. But I want to. Somebody made a statement here. I talked about the Rothschilds. We mentioned the Rothschilds, and they said, "Well, Clay, you said the Rothschilds are Jewish. And I said, yes, I said that, yes.
They claim to be Jewish.
And they said, well, I thought they were Germans.
Yeah, they're that too.
And I've got up here on about your new article. Peter asked the question as to whether the United States of America is involved in the UFO alien business. In a very revealing examination, he looks at the development of advanced high technology built on the legacy of the top secret Nazi black projects following the end of World War II. And I've said there's a few things I can't tell you. I can't tell whether we're under fascism or if we're under communism. I mean, every plank on the Communist Manifesto is intact in America, but the idea of the corporations springing up around the banks is pretty much pure fascism. And I have interviewed people and talked to people that says Hitler didn't die in a bunker in Germany. He retired to a villa up in Argentina, along with a few other Borman and a few other people.
I actually just read the FBI report on that about 2 weeks ago.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the FBI knew that he was in Argentina back in 1945.
So this whole war and the Cold War and World War II was all staged to kill off an awful lot of white people. I mean, we got Germans fighting Englishmen, fighting Americans, fighting Russians. Russians were never our enemies. The governments were.
Interestingly enough, Russia actually came to the aid of the United States
during the Civil War.
During the Civil War. The Russians had one of the strongest navies there. They blockaded the United States, primarily the southern states, from getting any goods from Europe, so that the European monarchs and banksters couldn't interfere with what was going on in the United States. They couldn't sway the outcome. They kept the Civil War an internal thing in the United States and didn't allow outside forces to intervene. And now they're our enemies? Seriously. What happened? Oh, that's right. The Tsar was murdered. And who installed communism? The Zionists. So, where are we today? We're not under fascist control. The fascists died, the Nazis died, the communists died except for China. But what didn't die is Zionism. Zionism has grown. And that's why if you look at what's going on in the Middle East, virtually every country on the face of the earth has condemned Israel, except for the United States, for doing what they're doing in Gaza, and Israel's like, so.
Well, the Zionists control our media. The media controls our thinking. I mean, I used to think I was really informed. I'd get up every morning and turn on the Today Show and read the Miami Herald. I thought I was educated. I thought I was on top of things, and I didn't know diddly.
Clay, I turn on the morning news and I say, what are they feeding the people today? Seriously. It's funny. I got a real interesting awakening just to how produced the news is when Fukushima went off. I turned on headline news that they gave all of 90 seconds to the Fukushima event. Interestingly enough, and this is the day the day after Fukushima went off. Interestingly enough, they followed that segment up by doing a 97-second segment on Charlie Sheen's Torpedo of Truth tour. And I thought, isn't that appropriate? They just torpedoed the truth with some Hollywood entertainer. So I turned around and I switched over and I caught CCTV out of Beijing, China, which did another 15 minutes on what was going on over in Fukushima, Japan. And they ran this. They kept updates on that situation with 15-minute segments for a week.
while it was only just merely brushed over in the U.S. news.
Now, Fukushima and the laser attack on the BP oil platform in the Gulf, I believe those are attacks on our food supply. They are trying to poison us. They are trying, and that's exactly what the GMOs from Monsanto, who also gave us Agent Orange, and we've got depleted uranium. You know, our nuclear, talk about Fukushima, and keep in mind that every one of our nuclear power plants sits on a fault line somewhere across America. But the reason these nuclear power plants are dangerous is because they use uranium-232 or whatever that number is instead of thorium. If they used thorium to create these power plants, there would, first of all, there wouldn't be any danger of the meltdown, and two, they wouldn't be able to make the fuel and they wouldn't have the ingredients for the atomic weapons that us and Russia have been stockpiling. We've got enough weapons between us, Russia, and Israel to wipe out the population of the earth. And if we had thorium power plants, that wouldn't be possible. So who's making all the money off of the nuclear technology? I'd say it's probably the Zionists, wouldn't you?
Actually, it can be tracked right back to the Rothschilds, who are in the process of buying large tracts of land that are rich in yellow cake uranium.
And probably, again, this is, they've used Indians to mine it, so they're still killing off North American, South American Indians, aren't they?
That I couldn't tell you about. The tracts of land that they're most interested in are in Afghanistan and I believe Brazil. Brazil or Ecuador. It's a country down in Argentina, down in South America that's got some very rich deposits. And they've been buying up those tracts of land. They've been doing it for quite a few years now. You know, here's the problem that we're facing with nuclear reactors today, Clay, and that is that they are not just loaded with uranium, they are loaded with uranium and plutonium. The decommissioned nukes, they've taken that material and they've mixed it. It's called MOX fuel, which is extremely hot, and they've put it in reactors that are at the end of their lifespan. And it's like, okay, well, let's turn around, light a candle, and then open up a gas valve without the flame, and when the tube hits the right mixture, we'll have a nice explosion. That's pretty much what they've done. And what's coming out of Fukushima isn't just regular radiation from uranium, it's radiation from plutonium. And that is the deadly killer. Now, interestingly enough, last week I actually went out and bought myself a Geiger counter. And when I first got it, the background radiation I was reading about between 11 and 17 bark joules per second, I guess per second it is per minute, whatever, parts per million. And when the weather changed, we were getting a predominant flow of air from the south. When the weather changed to northwest and cooler, drier air came in after a rainstorm, the background radiation went up to between 30 and 50, which is still a little high, but kind of within acceptable limit. Background radiation should be about 11 to 15. That would be normal. Now, it's interesting. Right now, I'm looking at it, and the background radiation I have is 22, so it's fairly low, and that's a good thing. The highest I've seen it hit was a little over 50, unless I put it next to my uranium glass, and then it makes little noises like this. I don't know if you can.
I can hear that. Yes, sir. I can hear that.
Well, I've got a piece of antique uranium glass, and it just makes this thing bark. So when I don't now, yes, the uranium glass does contain uranium because of the funny color, and it doesn't really start to react unless you're right on top of it. So
Yeah, it's probably not. I wouldn't drink out of it, and I keep it away. I don't get any radiation readings when I'm a few inches away. It's only when it's right next to it that I pick it up. So I use it as a little test to make sure that the Geiger counter isn't doing its thing.
So,
but here's the thing.
go ahead.
Why would I would never have thought of buying a Geiger counter before Fukushima went off. Never. Now I got it sitting monitoring to see what's going on in the weather. And the reason that I did that is because about a month ago, I bought a piece of frozen fish, piece of salmon. I got it home and I opened it up and the thing was full of tumors. It was full of tumors. Yeah.
Ugh.
The Pacific salmon, full of tumors.
Well, that's what's happened with the Gulf down here. I mean, I'm kind of afraid to eat any shrimp from down here. And you know, I had people nuclear text that said we don't worry as much about radioactivity as we do oil. He said, you know what's in that oil? Prehistoric viruses. And you know, I lived 10 miles from the Trinity site. One of my neighbors slept through the first atomic blast 10 miles from the Trinity site. And when he got up the next morning, he went outside his house and there was guys in radiation suits and Geiger counters walking around his property. He said, what are you boys doing out here? They said, we're checking for radioactivity, sir. He said, there ain't no radioactivity in Bingham. Hell, we don't even have a radio. And
alrighty then.
And he was still alive 10 years ago.
Yeah, here's the thing, or I guess the positive thing, if there is a positive thing about nuclear radiation, unless you're really close to it, it's not going to really harm you a lot. It's the long-term effect. And, you know, it's like finding animals with tumors all through their body. If the animals have it, guess what? We're going to get it. Where it hurts the human population is prenatal and infancy. 6 months after Fukushima went off, they found that infant mortality went up by 40% in the SeaTac Vancouver area. Think about that. Infant mortality just jumped. The first numbers they ran came back between 35 and 37%, and the authorities said, no, those numbers have to be wrong. You got to rerun the numbers. When they reran the numbers, they came up with 40%. Yeah. Why isn't that being put out on the news? You know, we're facing a time when the laws of nature, the laws of the multiverse have been violated. We have been violated. We as a population of people, of living entities, has been violated. And now it's time for retribution. And so, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. Yep, things are going to get worse before they get better, but the thing is they're going to get better. We're going to have to go through a lot more of what's going on according to the prophecies. According to the prophecies, the Pope's been calling for the end of the debt system for over a year. Interestingly enough, why is he doing that? Well, all of a sudden now we see BRICS coming on the scene. There's a new bank in town, backed with, it's all in the black. It doesn't have any red tape.
It got a lot of gold, too. China has more gold than probably anybody.
Yep, and there's actually all this gold that's supposed to be hidden in Indonesia somewhere, which they're trying to release to the population of the Earth. That'll be an interesting thing. There's a website, Neil Keenan is working, he actually presented a lawsuit. I saw the lawsuit several years ago in federal court in Atlanta, which is a lawsuit against the banking system, and it's a lawsuit to release this gold that is being held, which Kennedy, from what I understand, set up in trust for the United States with Ferdinand Marcos. So all this gold is supposed to be the equivalent of $6 million per person on the face of the planet. Boy, wouldn't that put an end to the debt system? But look out, because nobody's going to want to lose power to us. So they're all going to try to maintain power and try to stop any of this from happening. We can look for the situation in the Middle East to get worse. We can look for the situation between in Ukraine to get worse, and we can look for the dollar to collapse and to be replaced. Now, we're going to see the rise of the church. We're going to see the fall of the church. We're also going to see the rise and fall of the New World Order. None of it's going to be pleasant. But if we stay in that vibration of love, if we care for each other, and we stop trying to kill each other, but care for each other, look for ways to bond. You must love your neighbor as you do yourself, and the most important part is, you must love Yahweh your God with your whole heart, soul, and mind. Being in that vibrational state of love changes our thinking ability and changes our outlook. It takes us out of the fight and flight syndrome.
It is exactly what I've tried to tell people. Look, the enemy's motif here is divide and conquer. They want you afraid of your neighbor. They want you afraid of me. They want you afraid of everything because they feed on your fear, I believe. I think they're like psychic vampires. And if you work together and you work with your neighbor and you've got the outlook, look, if it's good for me and my children, it should be good for my neighbor and her children. And so if we work together, we can solve things right in our own neighborhood. Now, one of the things that they've done here is our energy. It's like Rockefeller said, competition is a sin. All those power lines out there are supplied by J.P. Morgan's copper mines. And we've got the ability, the knowledge is out there to build generators you can put in your garage that don't burn any fuel, that run on magnetic energy, magnetics. But they don't want you to have that. They don't want you to know about that. They don't tell you about that. They don't give it to you because they don't want you being self-sufficient. They don't want you being independent. They want you to be connected to that copper umbilical cord that they've strung around this country, and it's not necessary. It's not what we need. We can run all our cars and on electricity that's generated by the wheels. They make wheels you can bolt onto an electric car that'll recharge the batteries.
Yeah, everything from atomic structure to the way that the universe itself moves is all based on electromagnetic energy.
Yes.
Everything.
And we've got cars that built UFOs.
Why not just tap into that energy? It runs the universe and everything in it, from the smallest particles to the largest.
It's what Tesla did. It's what Carr did. It's and there's probably a lot more out there. We've got teleportation. We've got Stargates. We've got faster than light ain't something in science fiction books no more. It exists.
You know what we have most of all, Clayton, and I really want, if you were just about out of time, and I want to end on this, we have a fantastic future ahead, and we have the prospect of having our DNA repaired. So guess what? We no longer face death. Wouldn't that be interesting? Having perfect DNA. There's an interesting movie out. It's called Lucy. It's about a woman who gains total use of her mind, 100% use of her brain. Now, in order to really apply that in a positive way, we have to lose the beta fight and flight syndrome. We will get those powers back. Think about the powers that Jesus had. He had perfect DNA, perfect use of his mind, and he had God's blessing.
You can do what I do and more.
Absolutely. All you need is faith the size of a mustard seed. It's understanding that it's love that'll bring us all together.
Your level of vibrational energy. Raise it, folks. And By the way, I certainly could use a donation today. The dogs are out of food. I'm out of chili. Go to freeamerican.com, and we've got the links here to Peter Kling's site. You can get Peter's book up at freeamerican.com. It's the links are take you right to his site. Peter, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Clayton, anytime. Folks, love and blessings to all. Read Letters to Earth. You can survive Armageddon. You can download the PDF today from my website, www.peterkling.com, and you can change your future today.
All right.
Love and blessings to all, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. God bless.